Hey, welcome to the Art Condition Podcast, a weekly show that will discuss the business, community, and often undiscussed stress and mental health concerns of being a professional artist, or even a serious hobbyist. I'm Joby. I've been in the tattoo and illustration professions for 25 years. My co-host is Moose, a data analyst, social media manager, and art agent. If you enjoy the content, please consider visiting the Patreon page in the show notes to help support the effort. Or if that's not an option, please like, subscribe, leave a good review, or just share with your friends. And definitely go visit the links of our guests on this episode. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.
But what is it?
He doesn't hate all of us, just some of us.
But before we get too deep into that, let's talk about you guys. Let's start with Kfir. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
My name is Kfir. I like long moonlit walks on the beach. Romantic didn't know what. My name on Twitch is Cave Geek Art. I make fantasy maps mostly on leather, and I'm a nerd, and I'm also the Flavor Text Adventures is my brainchild, which we'll get to later. But and all of these people work for me except Mike. He works with me. That's it.
All right, my turn. I am Mike Vacara. I am the co-director of Flavor Text Adventures. I'm a illustrator and graphic designer and book designer. So this is a little bit of an unusual project in that I don't actually do any of the artwork for it. We've got Joby and Tim and great folks like that for this, and we'll get more into what we do with Flavor Text. Yeah.
Tim, go for it.
My name is Tim. I'm a tattooer and illustrator. Pretty much just a jack of all trades when it comes to what I can do or want to do with art. I try to stick my fingers in a lot of different pies. But I'm excited to be a part of the Flavor Text team, and even more excited to be here now. So, yeah.
What is Flavor Text?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you're fine. You're fine, man.
All right.
But the big question.
Flavor Text is, yeah.
Yeah.
What so who's that? We're going back to Cave?
What we really want to know, Cave, I'd like you to talk a little bit about Flavor Text, what it is. Why should we care about it? How is it going to change our lives?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, Flavor Text, the little short, the not so short history of it is that back in I think it was 17, maybe 2018. 2018. I was at Origins Game Fair in Ohio. It's a gaming convention that's been around for decades. And I streamed from there as Cave Geek Art, as I usually do, and my stream mascot is a cave troll for some reason. Don't ask me why. And the conversation kind of went to what would cave troll taste like. I don't know how that happened, but the conversation as I was standing at my booth and talking to people on the stream, what would cave troll taste like? And I thought, I have no idea, but I know who would. And I'm wearing rubber gloves because I was just about to deal with the 3D print. So I said, I know who would. The fine folks of Cubicle 7, who are the company who used to publish the One Ring role-playing game, they just recently stopped. But they had a booth there, so I thought if anyone would know, it would be them. So I took the camera and with my phone and the stream, and I went over to their booth and I asked to speak to the guy that was there, and I'm like, hey, I've got a question for you. Do you write any of this stuff? And he goes, yeah, I wrote a couple of these books. I'm like, well, okay, I've got a question for you. What would cave troll taste like? And that started. We went down a goblin hole, not a rabbit hole, and it was like a half-hour conversation, and it was pretty fascinating. So on the way back to my booth, the idea just sprang into my head of what if there was a D&D supplement or just general tabletop fantasy role-playing game supplement that would talk about things like that, about what it would be like to eat certain monsters and what would it do to you if you did. And immediately came to mind my friend Adam Lawson. He's an old friend of mine who I played D&D with for a long time, and he played a character called Alton Green, who's a halfling chef bard that basically uses cooking as his performance. When he inspires his teammates, he sprinkles spices on them and things like that. And so I called Adam, I think that day even, and asked him if he'd be willing to let me use Alton as the main character of this. And the idea is that Alton Green, the most fabulous halfling chef in the land, who's well known for cooking various exotic monsters, he's writing his greatest works, his memoirs. So every chapter is a different monster, and he tells the story of his adventure of how he, some sort of encounter with that monster, and then gives you the recipe for cooking that monster in real life. So that's Mike's domain. No, Mike on the stream is what that way, this way. I don't know. Anyway, that's Mike's domain, and being trained as a chef, and the recipes are real, and for you to cook at home, obviously with substitutes of what you could use if you can't find troll meat or unicorn or whatever. And then we also provide the third part of that chapter. So there's the story, the recipe, and the third part is the gaming content, which right now is mostly for 5th edition. When we started, it was 5th edition and Pathfinder, but we quickly realized that's a whole lot of work to do both. So we're focusing on 5th edition for now. And it's basically taking elements of the story and the recipe and bringing them into the gaming table rather than the dinner table, so that if your character wants to eat this monster, what do you have to do to cook it? Or what would it do to you? And sometimes, because eating that monster isn't necessarily going to do anything special, then it may have some, maybe a map of the dungeon from the story, or a magical item from the story, or an NPC. And there are also always questions for dungeon masters on how to take the story and all that and kind of flesh it out. So we call it pinch of inspiration, because Alton really is not a musician. He's not your usual bard that just sings songs and plays an instrument. He's a storyteller and chef. So he wants dungeon masters to have the tools to kind of take those stories and make them their own stories. So there might be several questions about details he left out of his story intentionally. And I'll admit that sometimes they're not intentionally left out. Sometimes because we can't figure out what to say. So hey, we'll just ask questions about this and make it seem like it's on purpose. But yeah, so it's cool. You should check it out. And it's been a whole hell of a lot of fun.
So a follow-up question: how many hours per week do each of you spend working on flavor text adventures?
About 1,000
per week.
Not a whole lot of time. I think I wouldn't know, because my role in it is to mostly coordinate, manage all the different people, and come up with ideas and talk to other contacts and things. So it's hard to quantify that time. But Mike, Tim, and Joby could answer that maybe more accurately.
Yeah, it's really going to depend on the week, and it's going to depend on what I'm doing that week. As culinary director, that means I have to actually do the cooking, and that means getting a photographer in the kitchen and doing things in a specific way so that those things can be documented. And moreover, I don't just pull these recipes out of my brain and declare them done. A lot of the times there's several iterations. We kind of want to do this. Let's find some recipes online and try some different ways. And well, this worked, or this didn't work, or, I liked this a lot, but it needs something else. For example, the unicorn burger probably took about 60 hours in the kitchen. We made that rainbow challah bun over and over and over and over. It was easily there's more time in that bread than there was in the chimerical, which is a recipe that, when done correctly the first time, takes 16 hours. So there's that. And then, of course, I also handle all of the layout. So I'm writing the recipe with instructions that someone else could use. I'm putting it all together in InDesign, making sure that things go up on Patreon. So there are some weeks where it's 2 hours and it's mostly having a meeting with someone. And then there are other weeks where it's 20 hours because I've had to make the same dish 4 times because something went wrong.
As it often does, right?
Yeah.
Much to Mike was saying is like it does depend on what the task at hand is, what the assignment that has been handed down to me is. That kind of gives me a general idea of how much time is going to be needed to do some of the artwork. But ultimately, it some things are easier than others. It depends on if it's game content versus just like a snippet from the story or an illustration from the story. So the and it kind of breaks down in the phases. At least when I'm working, I try to quick rough sketch, send that up to Cave. Cave gives some art direction and critique, and then from there there's like a refining phase and then a final copy approval kind of thing. So sometimes it all goes quick. Sometimes it kind of it needs to sort of be folded over on itself a few times. So I don't know. I wouldn't be able to mark an exact hour count because it for me it does vary. Sometimes everything flows like water and other times like mud. So at least in my for me anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, speaking as part of the creative team myself, I sort of jokingly alluded to it earlier about being biased, but it is true. Full disclosure, I am part of the team at Flavor Text. I do some of the artwork myself, and it's it's the creative process. It's bumps and bruises as much as it is anything else. And going into it, I sort of always have a inclination for how much time it's going to take. But then it's there's a lot the herding cats, as we like to say, can be tricky sometimes, and passing things up and down the chain is but the actual for me the actual drawing time will be between an hour to 2 hours. The drawings, all of the information and links to Flavor Text will be in the show notes and everything, so people will be able to
Kfir, what are you working on?
What's that?
Cave is up here doing something, and all I can see is his arm moving underneath the screen, and it's
with the gloves on. This is super awkward, man.
Yeah,
I'm trying to have a conversation here, dude. Like, why don't we
Mike
have your full
interrupt,
attention?
but not me.
The people on Spotify and Apple have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Yeah,
That's okay. They can use the deepest, darkest parts of their imagination.
This is called the art condition. I have a condition where I just have to keep my hands busy, and so I got to multitask. So I'm just cleaning some 3D printer parts.
As long as we're totally off the rails, I want to mention that I have a T-shirt idea where it will say "Don't laugh, it's a condition," and I'm going to use your face, Cave, as the
sweet.
The logo.
As long as I get royalties, a penny off of every shirt.
Okay, sounds
I'll
good.
Be a millionaire.
I forgot entirely what I was saying about how awesome I am, but that's okay.
Right.
I wanna go back and kind of reiterate and itemize the content that comes out of Flavor Text. You get story, you get recipe, and you get game content. And it's all very rich and well developed. Again, I'm biased, but I am doing my best to speak objectively. It is very well developed and tasty, if you may allow me. But this is presented on a Patreon page. If you are a subscriber, do you get every one of those? You don't get every one of those for like every
Yes,
tier of subscription? Oh, you do. Okay.
It depends on the level of your support. So for the dishwasher level, which is the lowest one, it's $1 a month. You get access just to read the stories and see the art, the story art. So Joby's art, for the most part. And we've had other artists throughout the 2 years we've been going, and other writers as well. But so that's for the $1. You get just to read cool, short fantasy stories that are hopefully funny and entertaining, and see amazing art. For the $3, I don't remember what that is, what we call it. It's you get to see the stories and the recipes, and get the posts, and then actually get PDFs that of the final polished, sort of book style story and recipe. So it's full photograph, instructions, recipe. Oh shush, sorry. Anyway, so you get to see those and download those in full, and then for the $5 level, you get everything. You get the stories, the recipes, and the gaming content in full PDFs.
Is Patreon the only way which people can get content, or do you also put it on like DriveThru RPG or other?
Right now, Patreon is the only way, but it'll very soon be on DriveThru. So probably by the end of the year, it'll all be on DriveThru. Obviously, Patreon is if you want to break the system, game the system, Patreon is the cheaper way.
I thought we were already on DriveThru, so shows what I know.
So,
Mike, sorry, was there more that you wanted to say about the Patreon?
There are higher tiers that we've only had somebody claim once, and those higher tiers are basically meant for a one-time thing. If you want to like include your own character or somebody in a story, you can sort of back it at a little bit of a higher tier, and then send us the information, and Alton will include your character in the story and things like that. It's not meant for someone to do, on a permanent basis. But hey, if somebody wanted to do that, that would be great. But we won't be able to put you in every story. So
right. If I can, Mike, I want to go to you specifically for a second, because I want to go into what you said a little bit more about how much time you put into the Rainbow Hollow Bread. People won't know what we're talking about, so I think it would do you justice for having put that much work into it, that we'll have like a special link in the show notes just to that specific information.
Sure.
And you said that took you about like 60 hours, and obviously like some recipes will be less or more, but this is a concept that kind of fascinates me. Like I'm a terrible cook, first of all, and the idea of coming up with a recipe thing that is new, you're not just like one-to-one transferring something that you found in a cookbook. You're putting this spin on it in this like innovative sort of way, and then presenting it in this fantasy setting, where this was a fantasy creature. Can you talk a little bit about like the creative process of coming up with a food recipe, and then how you adapt it into flavor text?
So just kind of starting at the beginning with that, like there is nothing new under the sun, and I think as artists we encounter that a lot, but in cooking it is particularly true. Some things are just never going to taste right together, and some things are always going to taste right together, and we've discovered that thousands of years ago. It's kind of like dumplings or noodles or whatever. Like every culture has their own version, and you can call it pasta or ramen or whatever. But at some point, it's boiled bread. And so I don't want to say like, hey, I sit down and I think about it, and it just springs fully formed from my skull like Athena. You are always cribbing things from other recipes, and sometimes we will start from a place of we want to do goblins, and we think that in a fantasy setting goblins are going to be like bacon, so let's research interesting recipes for bacon. And there's another chef, Whitney Libby, who I work with, and we toss a lot of ideas back and forth. We share recipes back and forth, and we're like, well, this idea is interesting in this, but I'm not sure. And then we kind of take it into the kitchen and we start experimenting. And a lot of the times those experiments are, let's use this recipe that we found and just make it and just see how it goes. One of the interesting things about the internet and there being 1,000 recipes for any idea you can possibly think of is that a lot of those were never tested. It's like immediately evident. Sometimes you can tell it from the comments if enough people have tried it that like, hey, that doesn't work. Videos on Facebook and TikTok are like super, super full of this of, hey, you can make flan in the milk container that it comes in the microwave. And then anyone ever who attempts to do it just makes a giant mess of their microwave. It does not work on a chemical level. It's never going to happen.
You mean people are lying to me on the internet, dude? What the fuck?
I don't know why. I don't know what they seek to gain from it.
Oh, they're getting rich.
Yeah. I'm actually 3 Muppets in a trench coat. So everyone lies on the internet. But then we start experimenting with it, and we're like, this one's more effective, and this one isn't good. Maybe we change this quantity of an ingredient, maybe add this spice, we do this a little bit longer. There's all of that stuff comes from somewhere else. It's very, very rare that you wake up one morning and you're like, this truly unique and genuine idea. With the example of the rainbow challah for the unicorn thing, our whole process is Kfir and I get together and we kind of talk about what monsters we want to feature over the course of the next year. And those are monsters that we think are going to be interesting, that we think are going to lend themselves towards interesting outcomes, and specifically things that aren't going to get us in legal trouble, because there's plenty of flagship monsters that are just a no-no. You can't do it. Going to get us in hot water. So
Sorry,
we work our way around that.
Sorry to interrupt you. You said flagship monster?
So like wizards, there are monsters that they consider to be core to their product identity and don't speak their name.
Oh, interesting.
Right. So there's some, classic monsters that will not ever be featured because we can't.
But you always come with your own version of it. Like instead of calling it a mind flayer, you can call it like a squid monster.
Yeah, you could totally do that. That is just that's rolling the dice, if you'll accept the pun. So I'm a little bit more conservative than that. I'm like, let's exhaust the book before we get there. Let's just cook a halfling and see how people take that.
I like that.
So anyway, we had come up with the idea of including unicorns, and Cave and I agreed that it would be really, really funny to take this super majestic creature and just decide that like it's pub food. It's gotten mangled, it's gotten mashed, it's not possible. And then it really dovetailed well with the story of, how do we make our character who we want to be very likable, how does he come upon unicorn meat? We can't have him kill a unicorn. So spoilers, he gets some unicorn meat that's met an unfortunate end. You'll have to actually go and read the story. And it can't be used as anything except ground chuck. There's no unicorn fillet to be had. So we decided a burger. And we're going to go really classic for the burger itself. Beef, spices, cheese. We made a whiskey glaze that has glitter in it, because why the hell not? But the real fantastic portion is this challah bread bun that is rainbow, because of course it is for unicorns.
Fuck yeah.
The challenge there is challah is just a very challenging bread to bake in the first place. And bread in and of itself can be very challenging. You're dealing with humidity, you're dealing with temperatures, you're dealing with proofing. Everybody who's been through quarantine knows that, like, yeah, you can figure out bread, but it's kind of, again, taking your chances every time. So Hala is particularly difficult because it's supposed to be very, very light and fluffy. And when you do multicolored dough, there's really two ways to achieve it. The one is to make 5 batches of dough with a different color and then try and swirl them together. Or you make 1 batch, you cut it into 5 chunks after it's proofed, you try and mix your dye in, and then swirl them all together again. And it doesn't really matter which approach you take, but you have just an incredible amount of work to get done. And again, this is a super fluffy dough. You can't work it too much with your hands. I, in particular, I have very, very warm hands. So like the first time I did this, it was super dense because the bread started cooking while I was kneading it.
Are you
And then
serious?
I got it out, and it was just like it was like, oh cool, sourdough. This is garbage.
Oh wow.
We finally got it, thanks in great part to Whitney, who is much more experienced with bread than I am, and has incredible determination. And we got it. And then we made this pastry horn, like the unicorn's horn, and then we filled it with queso and dumped it over the top of it. So you've got this, whiskey glazed glitter beef patty with rainbow fluffy bread and pastry and gooey cheese all over it.
There was something mentioned. I want to divert just for a second. There was something mentioned in the chat, Ali Briggsart, that she said about in regards to what you said about the flagship monsters of Wizards and D&D, and there's some monsters that you just can't touch. And she pointed out that the license agreement in the DM's Guild can allow you to utilize the trademark or the copyright material of D&D and Wizards. Who did we lose? Oh, okay, came back. And Kfir, you responded in the chat that through DM's Guild, Wizards of the Coast then just owns your stuff. Can we hash that out a little bit more? Because we had some D&D content creators on in episode 2, I believe it was. Yeah, and they, one of them in particular, posts a lot of their stuff, all of their stuff. The majority of their content is on the DM's Guild. Keeping in mind that this is a Patreon setup for flavor text, is there still like an overarching reason for why DM's Guild wouldn't be a good outlet at all? Kfir, can you talk about that a little bit?
Push to talk.
Push to talk, man.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I wouldn't say it's 100% a bad idea, but it depends on what you're trying to do. And the biggest hurdle with DM's Guild is the exclusivity of it. So if you post something on DM's Guild, you are not allowed to post it anywhere else. We could not have a Patreon if we posted the stuff on DM's Guild. And beyond that, I don't know the exact specifics of their licensing agreement, but they also pretty much own it, or own a large portion of it. Not to mention take a large portion of any money you make from it.
Yeah, I think it's like 50%, right?
I think at least that.
Oh.
At least. Might be more. And especially at this stage where we are, I mean, we've been doing it for almost 2 years, but content-wise, we're still fairly young and fairly new, and we're not sure where we're going to take it, etc. We don't want to limit ourselves. And so you can put things on Drive-Thru-RPG and still post everywhere else, or you can put it only on DM's Guild. And sure, you get, like your guest on that podcast said, when you put things on the DM's Guild, it goes directly in front of your perfect target audience, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to compete with anything. Well, you're competing with all the rest of the D&D stuff that's there, but you don't have to compete with the rest of the world to try to make the D&D people see your stuff. So in that sense, it is an advantage, but you're still limiting yourself to one single market. we couldn't do a Kickstarter, which we want to do, right? So, and there might be ways out of it with their licensing language, but I haven't looked at it close enough because simply the fact that we couldn't do a Patreon, we couldn't, there are people out there who use Patreon and don't use DM's Guild, for example.
But now, is it true that you wouldn't be able to have a Patreon if you just put out like a one-shot module, a one-shot flavor text module that incorporated some specific Wizards of the Coast D&D content, and then the next month on Patreon you did something that was not at all related? Can there not be a? That's
an interesting question. I honestly don't know the answer to that because without Mike.
My understanding, and this is of course if I'm understanding your question correctly. Let's say we wanted to do the Mind Flayer, which is one of their flagship monsters. We could solely put it out through DM's Guild and not put it out on Patreon. And then next month, when we did something that was not protected by their licensing agreement, put it out on Patreon. But really, what you're talking about is market share and where the audience is and where we're most likely to capture the audience. And that's tough because what's the conversion rate going to be from DM's Guild to Patreon? Patreon is not a discovery platform, but it is a loyalty building platform. So if we put out a protected one on DM's Guild, are those people ever going to find the unicorn content on Patreon? And really, our focus since we started this has been let's build a roster of enthusiastic fans. It's not about getting the sales for 1 month or one particular piece of content, but building something that's sustainable and we can continue to grow month after month. I'd rather get 1 or 2 new patrons every month than have 1 month where we get 100 sales and then never see those people again.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And I don't bring up any of these questions to be like, hey guys, why aren't you doing this? But more to explore the issue just because this, this podcast is for the sake of a wide range of creatives that might have questions about these kinds of things. So they're worth investigating that.
What you can do regarding those monsters specifically, their brand identity monsters, which is what a lot of third-party publishers do, is they'll rename that monster, reskin it and rename it, right? So instead of a beholder, it's an ocular orb. Instead of a mind flayer, it's brain sucker. I don't know, right? So there are ways around it, and as long as the stats aren't exactly 1-to-1, as long as the art isn't 1-to-1 copied concepts, so there's some leeway there, and it's okay. And especially when you're a little guy, and in the gaming industry everyone's a little guy other than Wizards of the Coast, they're not going to come after you if you've gone to that effort of doing that. So but you still can't post it on DM's Guild if you want to be able to post it elsewhere. I would like to mention also, by the way, that the lovely gentlemen here are not the only people involved in flavor text. We have Alex Bates, who is the writer and was supposed to be here, but had something else come up. And he's been a fantastic writer for the last several months, a year maybe even.
He's a pretty neat guy.
Yeah, he makes miniatures. If I can throw a shout out to him, Forge of Ice minis is his main livelihood, but he's also a writer and he's done fantastic work. And also Whitney and Mike, you take those up.
Whitney Libby is the other culinarian on the team. She's an I think she's a more talented chef than I am personally. Just really great in helping me figure out recipes and workshop them, and cooks desserts that'll put you in a coma. And Elise Rorick is our staff photographer. If you look at the photos from all of anything pre-COVID, they're gorgeous, they're perfect. And if you look at the ones after March, you can tell that it's me trying in my quarantine kitchen to still put together content, and we're trying to work that out. She's a fantastic photographer. She does some book design stuff, and she's just a general fantastic person. You can find her at Lucy Covey, LusiCovi Creative, on Patreon and everything else like that.
Yeah,
so this is a large team. Who do you have that's handling the getting the word out? How does that happen?
That's a good question. All of us are pretty much terrible at it. as most creative people are, social media and self-promotion is not our strong suit. So we've struggled and continue to struggle with that. We simply, honestly, at this stage, we just don't have because everyone else has their own thing, right? This is sort of a side project that everyone's doing for the, out of the kindness of their heart, and getting paid very, very little for it. So we don't have the time to do it ourselves, and we don't have the money to hire somebody to do it full time. We had for 3 months, we had an angel investor who just loves the project, the idea of flavor text so much that they just gave us some money to hire somebody to do it, and we had that for a while, but we just that dried up, and that's where we're at right now. So if anyone really listens to this and loves the idea and wants to do flavor text social media for us, please give me a shout. But yeah, it has been a challenge for sure.
It's a labor of love for everybody that's involved, but
yeah,
everybody.
I do the posts when content is actually published. I do the posts for that on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Discord. But beyond that, to kind of keep interest going, to keep the ball rolling day to day, that's very difficult for us to do.
Have you guys been posting on like the D&D subreddit or the D&D Facebook art group?
We have not. Other than when Joby, I know, posted his Myconid on at least one or two of those places.
So
but no, we have not directly done it.
Yeah, the visual stuff that you guys are pumping out with Joby, it's Tim, right? Not Alex, because Alex is not here. Okay. And you guys have the visual stuff, and the visuals is what draws people in on the internet. Like visual posts do really well in general, so you could just link the Patreon with. Actually, no, I was gonna say link the Patreon, but you want to post the picture on Twitter or whatever, and then in a reply to that post include the link, because social medias do not like you having the link in the first post anymore.
Say that again.
Sort of like
on Reddit.
On Reddit, sort of thing.
I'm sorry. So on Reddit, you want to post the picture, and then in a reply to it, include the links in the comment section.
Oh, okay.
And the same thing is true with Twitter. The same thing is true with Facebook. You want to post the picture first, and the links in the comments.
Yeah, I was aware of that with Reddit. I thought for a second you were saying that something with Reddit had changed, but yeah, that's a point that's. Sorry, we're getting off the flavor text topic just for a second, because heads up to artists everywhere that post on Twitter. The current state of affairs seems to be that Twitter will not like your post as much if you have a link in the original post. If you just post the picture of the art, and then as a part of that thread, as a secondary post, you then post a link to where to go and where you want people to end up, then the algorithm won't punish you for it.
And we'll talk about this a little bit later with Dave Cave when he joins us, but
right.
He has found that it's true on Instagram as well. If you even include the word Patreon in your text of your post, it will not share that link with anybody else. It will hide the post, or like bury the post in the feed. So these are little marketing tidbits if you guys want to apply them to your own social media accounts.
Yeah, and coming back to flavor text and the social media marketing end of that, it's it's sort of one of the reasons why maybe it doesn't happen as fluidly as would be optimal is there are so many hands, there are so many cooks in the kitchen. I don't know what the appropriate analogy is, But and everybody's sort of like responsible for their little end of it, and like I said before, it's a labor of love. So as it kind of congeals more and more, I think those kinds of things will become, more regular and more efficient. The good news is that there is a great catalog of material waiting to be pumped out. And as we have learned on previous episodes, the internet loves to binge consume, and there is a veritable Bible of flavor text. But we're going to get to some of the upcoming news for flavor text more towards the end. I want to do some like real basic intro level stuff, because we've talked about D&D before on this podcast, and and the creative nature of coming up with D&D content. And I'm going to assume that most people listening to this are familiar with the general concept of Dungeons and Dragons, but maybe some might not grasp the idea of like all this extra content, and how that plays into things. So Kfir, maybe you can talk for a little bit on like how does all of this supplemental material get brought in? Like what is its relevance to, like, there's Dungeons and Dragons the game that people play, but then there's like this whole world of extra content that innumerable amounts of people are making. Where do the two come together? What are the mechanics in D&D that allow for outside material to be incorporated?
I mean, D&D it's a role-playing game, so leaving mechanics aside, it's just your imagination. So you can do whatever you want in a role-playing game. Mechanically, we know originally that Alton Green is a chef and a bard, technically. So we have that sort of coming into it, and we just sit down and say, all right, what can be the effects of eating a certain monster? So we just have to be creative about it. And sometimes it's very simple, like what our first chapter was cave troll, and what will cave troll do to you. So they're usually we try to get some sort of advantage and disadvantage, some pros and cons to eating something. So eating cave troll will give you what's it called, dark vision in D&D, and you'll be able to see in the dark, but it'll also make you sensitive to sunlight. Sometimes, not always. So it depends on how well you do cooking it, or it might depend on your reaction when you eat it, right? So you get a saving throw that you have to pass, or if you fail, you might be allergic to it, or you might suffer some sort of a bad result. With the unicorn, we figured unicorn being such a legendary sort of magical creature, we might go a little more whimsical with it. So there was a whole random table that you need to roll on, and it with all sorts of different results. Some of them could be absolutely dangerous and deadly. Like it could teleport you in a random direction, including up, right, for like a mile away. And that might mean that your character now is dropping from a mile up and splatters on the ground. Or it might grant you a wish, but you won't know. That's the problem. You have no idea what's going to happen. Your dungeon master is going to roll it, or you roll it, but the dungeon master isn't going to tell you. So it might be that you're eating a unicorn, and all of a sudden, you roll the dice and nothing happens, where it really just grants you a wish. So the first time you are going to say something like, I wish this happened, right? That's going to happen. So there's a lot of fun, whimsical things like that. Some monsters, like I said, are boring. So we'll bring in items or characters from the stories, and we'll create those in full. So we'll give you we had one story about one of my favorite stories, honestly, is about Baron Rumbus the third, or whatever he was, and he was a gelatinous cube that is ancient and has become sentient and intelligent because of an experiment by a wizard. And so that whole story is really funny. But he, eating gelatinous cube, we actually had a recipe for that. But we also had him as a character, because he was a very unique, very interesting character that you could meet in the game that your dungeon master might decide would be fun to encounter. So we had the entire character created so that you can meet him, and that's always a fun process of creating something that doesn't exist yet in D&D. So it's not just copy paste something that already exists; it's make something new that's fun. Other than that, mechanically, magical items, potions, weapons, all kinds of new things that we've created are always fun to do. And there's always the easy way of you look for something that comes close to what you want, right? And then you tweak it from there, just like reference for art. So you find a spell that has the effect of what you want, and then you say, well, how do I make it different and applicable to this situation? I hope that answers your question. So
yeah, certainly. The one of the thoughts behind the question is, when I think about, I'm not even a huge D&D player. I used to play a lot when I was a kid. Haven't played in a very long time. Only recently kind of started dipping my toe back into it. But the content that can be made for it is so vast and virtually unlimited. There are parameters that the game imposes on like what you can and can't do, but even then, I don't know, like DM's discretion goes pretty far as what they're gonna allow into the game. But it's, I just wanted to sort of sing the praises of D&D as a fertile ground for creativity, and there might be a lot of creators out there who are familiar with D&D just as an abstract concept, but maybe had never considered it as an avenue for creative outlet and potential income stream. And this is all to say that that it's, if you've been overlooking it or you haven't considered it before, check it out, because it's a market that is growing fast. As you have seen just in the little bit that we've talked about so far, the possibilities are virtually endless. Mike, yeah, you got something?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that, if you are an artist and you're someone who's looking at a creative career and you're not engaging with D&D or Pathfinder or something like that, it's got values way beyond the recreational, because it is constructive shared storytelling, which when you view it through that lens, there's almost no creative career that doesn't benefit from that. It's building your ability to work as a team. It's building your ability to work towards a shared goal with not just different skill sets, but often different amounts of information. And like as an animator, something like D&D is hugely important, because you're learning those improv skills, and animators need to know how to act. It's not just the skill set of how do I make something look like it's moving, but what does body language do? What does dialogue do? And so on and so forth. And as someone who, like Tim and like yourself, has done a lot of different things in the creative sphere that at AAA levels would be broken out into individual things, but at our level of professionalism, there's a lot of overlap. It's a great thing to do. And then I think a lot of artists who are aspiring, they want to kind of put themselves in the room and just draw or just paint or just sculpt or whatever it is, because they think they need to constantly produce output. But the worst thing you can do is to not consume creative content. You will eventually run out of ideas, or you're just beat your head against the wall. So this is a really, really good way to get your recreation, get your social, learn how to do some other stuff, and keep the ideas flowing.
Speaking of art, Tim, you're an artist. So when you are interacting with us, do you do bottom up creativity? Like, do you start with the idea and send it to them and say, hey, wait, what do you guys think about this thing I drew? Is this something you can make into a recipe, something you can make into a story? Or are you more at the tail end where you take the story, you take the picture of the food, and then you make something out of it?
It's more of a tail end, as you describe it. Like, I think that and Cave and Jovi and Mike, they do well to sort of give a good direction to aim or a target, and then in some regard, it starts off as maybe just a description and an idea, literally off the top of the head. Like I have an idea of how I want to look, but they can't give you much more on the details. And then, you know, we sort of go through a process of sketching and refining. And in a weird way, like sculpture, it starts off very, very rough and then builds either through addition or subtraction and becomes something a lot more fleshed out. Uh, I will tip my hat to Cave because I worked with a lot of different people that have art criticisms or even more so advice or direction, and his has been some of the clearest and most accurate, like, or I should say useful is a better term. Dead serious, useful direction. Like it's not enough when you draw something and say, all right, what I need some feedback. What can we do here? And the answer is like, I don't know. I don't like it. Like that's not enough. You need some pretty specific targeting or useful things like, oh, you're a little taller, or I envisioned something, maybe with claws that it could grip something with rather than, hooves or, whatever the monster medley desires. But like right now, what we've also discussed is unifying the style, and that kind of kicks back over to Joby there. That's a real helpful tool as well, is knowing not just what to draw and what it needs to look like, but also how it needs to sort of match up, or how it needs to sort of like be cohesive, like it's being drawn by one hand, even though multiple hands are in this project. And that's some really good advice too. So very much like you said at the beginning of the question, was it's more tail end. It's not so much me coming out, with like a frantic sketch or an idea and handing it up the ladder. It's the other way around. It's passed down. And it's like, hey, this is what's on the docket. This is what we're looking to do. And then we play from there, and there've always been, correct me if I'm wrong, but you guys are always open for, there's open lines of communication. So you know what I mean? Like I know very much where I fit in the project, but at the same time, if I have ideas or if I want to, stretch the wings a little, there's an open dialogue can be brought around to that and stuff like that.
Yeah, Moose.
I was waiting.
Go ahead.
I was waiting for Cave to come in and go, no, you don't have that freedom at all.
Well, Moose beat me to the punch in dragging Tim into this, because I certainly didn't want you to feel excluded, Tim. And I wanted to ask you a little bit more about your role in flavor text, which you definitely just did, but also just as an artist. Well, you mentioned before that you tattoo outside of this. That's your main gig, right? Tell me a little bit more.
That would technically be, I guess you'd call the full-time position.
Right. Well, tell me.
Sorry, more about tattooing.
Well, no. Tell me a little bit more about like kind of like a brief synopsis of your art journey. Like, how do you come from tattooing into this like broader sphere of D&D, and or what attracted you into it?
Sure. Everyone get a comfy chair out. No, just kidding. But honestly, as far as art was concerned, art was always a part of my life. What led me to tattooing, it was an actual a very odd sort of twist of fate. I, interestingly enough, was involved in restaurants and cooking for a majority of my, we want to call it adult years. Like I sort of, after going to college for art and receiving a BFA for fine art, I took a huge turn and got into restaurant management. And so like you do, like, so I was doing that for like 12 years, and all parts of restaurants, not just management, but it wasn't, and I'm omitting a huge chunk of time, but it wasn't until later that a friend from college who got his MFA at the same college I went to with my wife and I, walked into one of my restaurant one day, and I was like, "Hey, man, you still got that tattoo shop?" He's like, "Yeah, I still do." And I go, "When are you gonna teach me how to tattoo, man?" And he's like, "Come on in."
Oh, wow, that's
So
awesome.
it kind of, yeah, and it kind of seemed like a sort of like providence, like planets aligning and everything coming together. But my wife originally, who if everyone doesn't know, my wife is a very talented and very prolific artist. And back when we were first dating, she actually apprenticed at that tattoo shop.
Hmm.
So I think she was, she had equipment, she had all the stuff that was necessary to really get started, but ultimately decided it wasn't for her. And so there, the equipment would rest in the closet for 10 years, and then I would be the guy plucking it out of the closet and marching into the tattoo shop and saying, I'm going to get back into art, because I was away from it for so long, because my choice in career had sort of taken me away from the creative side of things. I mean, I found ways to use my creativity in that, but that's a whole different ball of wax. But ultimately, like, putting my hands to work was not happening. And so this has been a phenomenal, like, past few years, because it has literally revitalized me as far as creatively and artistically. And one of the many great things has been flavor text to kind of to restoke those fires and get me back into drawing in general and other things. But yeah, but the tattooing is one of those things too. Like, the more you do a thing, the more you use it, whether it be drawing, whether it be listening to clients for my tattooing, or whether it be listening to art direction from, the flavor text team, Cave in particular. That that's sort of polishing of ability is it's priceless. I can't put an emphasis on enough of how, like, if you want to get better at anything, or if you want to just take your hand at something, you got to do it. You really got to do it. Like, you got to sit down and, you know rubber meets the road, whatever analogy you like.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. The creative process of flavor text was touched on a little bit when Moose, asked him if, you were sort of like more front end, or, front of the pipeline, or end of the pipeline. It's artists in this kind of capacity, or it's sort of the reverse of some of the other visual development pipelines, where there's like a concept artist team that comes up with like a lot of like visual imagery. And on this, it's so story based. We're more at the tail end of it. So I would like to go back a little bit and talk about that kind of creative process. And Kfir and Mike, maybe you guys can talk a little bit about this, as far as what that process looks like. Does the story come first?
Sure.
Is there an idea? Who comes up with the idea? Where does it kind of get its first initial kickoff?
So both Mike and I are longtime D&D and players and fantasy fans. So we have knowledge of what's out there as far as monsters and things like that. So we would, like Mike said earlier, we sat down at the beginning of the year and came up with a list of monsters. Just literally a list, and then we might put them in a certain order, sort of throw around ideas for what dish that could be, just something really, just in broad terms, not the actual specifics. And from there, we might put them in. Okay, which month do we want? We aim to publish once a month, and that doesn't always work, especially in 2020. But we'll put them sort of in an order. Sometimes we might want to do something that's seasonal, so we'll know that we want, the Thanksgiving sort of holiday thing at the end of the year, and something more summer-like in August or July. So that's how that works. Once we have the monster list, we'll send that to our writer, in this case Alex currently, and sort of come up with ideas with that. Sometimes we might have an idea already, and we are very open to hearing ideas from the rest of the team, even you guys as artists. If you have, like, hey, for I've got a cool idea for a story about, I don't know, some sort of a monster, right? And if we have an idea already, we might say to Alex, this is sort of what we want the story to be about. But generally, the way it works is, Alex, here's the monster. Give me a tweet-length pitch of what the hell happens, right? Literally, if you we found out early enough, actually, talking about writers, we found out that the type of writer we need is someone who can write comedy sketches more so than epic fantasy, because we're dealing with short stories that we want to be entertaining, not always funny, right? They can be scary, they can be serious, they can be funny, but it needs to sort of start, middle, and end sort of in 1 or 2 pages. Sometimes it's just the middle, but it needs to be a comedy sketch more so than an epic saga. And so if you can sum it up, if you can grab my attention in a tweet length pitch for that story, great. Then I can say thumbs up, thumbs down, and we can move on from there. So that's how that works. Once the story is more or less shaped, that's the process that goes between me and Alex back and forth. And then I'll send it to Mike, and Mike will read it and have suggestions. And, once the story is more or less finished, it might not have, the polishing details, but it's more or less finished. Then I'll show it to you guys, to Joby and, to Tim. And just, again, if I have specific ideas in my head for what I want the art to be, I'll let you know. But most of the time, it's read this and tell me what you want to draw from it, right? And Joby and Tim have different roles. Joby has been doing the story art, and Tim has been doing the gaming content art. So that does kind of direct your attention specifically to certain elements of the story. But beyond that, it's very, very open. Just tell me what you want to draw. And I might have suggestions, but honestly, I've had suggestions that then Joby or Tim come back with something that's way cooler than what I thought. So I'm like, sure, sweet, go with that. So and that's how it goes, and just back and forth. This recent chapter has been very challenging, actually, to come up with because we have to do a creature design for something that's a cross between a xenomorph and a hornet, and it's been very, very. It's a murder hornet chapter, basically.
Very challenging.
It's been very challenging to find the right creature design for that. But most of the time, it's just kind of a little bit of back and forth. I am learning how to be an art director. Never been an art director, so what Tim is saying is actually a surprise to me. That I did not think that I'm a good one.
You
I
are
guess,
good. You're better than good.
I guess I have the advantage of being a creative myself, and I've dealt with taking commissions from people and where they don't have the right information, and especially as a map maker, it is my biggest peeve when somebody commissions me and says, "Oh, just do what you want." Look, it's a map. I can't do what I want.
Right.
A map needs to be accurate. I can't just invent, locations in your world when you're an author and you want me to make you a map. And they think I can't. They think they're giving me the permission to do that, but to me that's a big no-no. Right?
Well, they're also not. They
Right.
are not actually giving you license to do that. What they're doing is saying, the labor you're going to put in now, and I'm going to force you to change later, I'm asking for free. This is, in my day job is graphic design, and my biggest complaint is not last minute work, not boring work. It's work without design specs. I'll get a request and it'll say postcard 8.5 by 11. And despite the fact that that's not a postcard size, I'll go ahead and design it, and they'll say, well, I wanted it postcard size. Well, okay, you shouldn't have marked that then, or, well, it's due Friday, and then they'll be at my desk Monday. Well, where is it? So as an artist, you always have to push, like Kfir is saying, to make sure that your clients understand expectations. Because if they say, just do whatever you want, unless this is someone you've worked with before and that you understand their design sensibilities and you understand their objective, and they're going to be good to work with, it's no, we really need to have this conversation now. We need to do notes. We need to do ideation. We need to respect the process, because otherwise you're going to be spending that time later, and you're going to be the one with the contract in your hands going, okay, no, but you have to pay me extra now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I honestly, I feel that, and I feel bad asking for changes, right? So I don't want that to happen. So I want to sort of get, first of all, a verbal concept of what it's going to be like, especially if you're working with people who you've not worked with a lot. Once you've developed a relationship and you sort of think on the same page and you've learned to trust each other, then I can just do something from this, and it'll usually be okay. But I don't like to ask for changes. So what I usually ask artists, and I've actually dealt with other artists when I've commissioned art that was really tough, because you say, send me the simplest blocked shapes, right, of just a composition, and they will send you a half-finished drawing that they've worked for 4 hours on. And I'm like, that's not what. And then they're angry because you asked them to change it.
Right.
So it goes both ways. And listening, I think listening and following instructions goes both ways. So I usually ask, just give me the roughest concept. Take 60 seconds, to just give me the roughest concept of what you're thinking about. And I might do a stupid drawing. I'm really bad at drawing, so I might do a very stupid line drawing of what I'm thinking about and send it to Joby or Tim. And I'm like, something like this, just make it look pretty. Or take it further. And then it's just a back and forth. And once we're like, okay, this is it, we've nailed it, then go all the way to the end and take it the home stretch sort of thing. But I hear you. I hate. I've experienced it myself, I guess, from both sides. So maybe that gives me an advantage as a quasi art director.
Oh, definitely. I mean, what sucks. What doesn't work. From the other end of the are on the receiving end, right. Both sides. So yeah, you come,
especially with a project like this where I know our staff is not being fairly compensated, or at least what I would consider fair. It's fair because we all knew what we were getting ourselves into, but I would love to be able to pay double the industry rate, and by industry, not gaming industry, like art industry, what people should be paid. I would love to double it if I could, but we can't at this point. So all of you guys listening, go support us on Patreon so that we could pay Joby and Tim what they should be.
And Cave and I at all.
Okay. Oh yeah. Or Mike and I at all. We have not made a single penny off of this in 2 years.
But to piggyback off that, we also, all being creative professionals, we share a vocabulary that I think is one of the biggest hurdles when you're dealing with commissions and clients in the rest of the space, is that sometimes they'll say things and the meaning of those words is completely divorced from what they're talking about. Or they're looking for edits and they're trying to express what they want, and it's really not what they're saying at all. And so I'm usually upfront about saying, like, hey, I'm going to come back for you and I'm going to show you examples and I'm going to make clarifications, because we're not actually speaking the same language. And part of my job as a freelancer is to read your mind. And the better I can do that, the more time it saves me, and by extension, money it saves you. I think that works really well for us. I don't think we've had too many instances where flavor text artwork has gone back and forth, up and down the line dozens of times. I certainly have had work go back and forth a lot more in other areas of my career. But that's a huge thing for podcast listeners who are, working in the creative fields, is to be really aware that what someone is saying may not mean what you're thinking, because they don't have the training and they don't use the same language.
Right. This all kind of leads well into one of the questions that I had, about the creative process being this sort of like bumpy, jarring experience sometimes, and things don't get put out on time. This labor of love that we talked about, everybody's sort of like in it for their own joy of it as much as any financial compensation. And I think that there's a lesson in there to, not get too discouraged and too down on yourself if things aren't always going according to plan, or, certainly that you're not getting rich overnight. Like, this is when you love something, you kind of like, really have to just like keep that slow, steady burn on it. Yes, some things ignite and turn into wildfire overnight, but most things take a steady pace. It's the marathon, not the sprint. And on that, I would like each of you guys to talk about just a little bit personally. What are some things, along the way that have helped you guys, or help make things work smoothly in terms of time management, organization, and what things that like kind of help you guys work on flavor text and just kind of like in general, like as a creative.
Do you mean actual tools?
It could be, just it's kind of an open-ended question, and it more just speaks to the effort of making the job easier outside of the pen to paper, so to speak. And it could be tools, or it could just be like ways of keeping yourself organized mentally, physically, whatnot.
I will say, and this is something that you and I sort of touched on for the future, but I will say that the first thing that comes to mind to me is streaming. When to have started streaming, or to stream regularly, I stream live, right? All my work, not flavor text work, but because it's just not as much of it. But my artwork, streaming it has been the best thing I ever did for my creativity. Once streaming became a habit. Because then before my and maybe I'm different from other artists, right? I don't do art because I have this uncontrollable urge to just create things. I sometimes will get an idea for something really cool and I want to make it, but once I started making a living off my art and I started going to conventions to sell, when before I started streaming, when I had enough material to sort of fill a booth, I found that I just kind of my motivation to create more, which then by association means get better, because the more you create, the better you get. My motivation kind of died off. So I'll just go watch Netflix or do whatever, right? Instead of working and creating more stuff. But when I started streaming and making it really became a habit that if I'm turning on, if I'm creating, the camera is on. If the camera is on, I'm creating. They go hand in hand. It meant that when I'm done with a project, I'm already thinking, before I'm even done with it, I'm thinking about what's the next one, right? Because, and I don't think it's because I have this community of people who are somehow that I'm somehow beholden to them, but it is such a habit that I sort of have to, right? It's become instinct to just think about what's the next thing I'm going to do, and it's the best thing I ever did for my creativity and therefore getting better. I am so much better skill wise at what I do now after, I want to say this is the 4th year of streaming, than I would have been, I think, if I did not stream and just kept on creating on my own. It keeps pushing my skills because I get bored. So if I keep doing the same thing over and over, I'll just be bored with it. So having to think, what's the next thing I do and how is that going to be different from what I've done so far, is keeping me pushing. And if I didn't stream, I wouldn't have that. So the one single thing I think I have to contribute to this is streaming. Other people, Tim, Mike, etc., might have other tools that have made a big difference for them.
Yeah, how about you, Mike? What are your thoughts on that question?
So I kind of have the exact opposite problem Kfir has. I never reach a point where I'm like, oh, I'm done. I can just go watch Netflix or play games all day. When my bio gets attached to this in whatever way, you'll see that I have my fingers in a dozen different pies on a leadership level. I've got my day job. I've got my freelance projects. I've got a couple of businesses I'm involved with. So for me, time management is about giving everything enough attention that my presence is improving whatever it is, the product or the service, as opposed to being a bottleneck and an obstacle for it. Which I would say I'm like 90% of where I want to be. Sometimes I'm still the one holding things up. So time management is about planning my week in advance and saying, okay, Monday night we're going to work on this, and Tuesday night we're going to work on this, and Wednesday night we're going to work on this, so that everything gets enough attention. I'm a chronic multitasker, which can be really, really great for getting things done. But the human brain doesn't actually multitask. It just switches between tasks rapidly. So one of the things that I found really helpful more recently is to say, okay, this is the thing, and we're just going to focus on this exclusively until we're done, and then we'll go on to the next thing, and try to not think all at the same time about everything that there is that I've got to get done, and everything that there is that I want to get done and haven't touched in too long, or whatever it might be. As far as actually making sure things get accomplished for flavor text, I take my inspiration from culinary school, and it's mise en place, which is French for everything in its place. And both from a cooking standpoint, that means getting out all your ingredients and all of your equipment and reading through your recipe before you've turned on the oven or the stove or whatever it might be, and making sure you really do have everything you need. But from a broader sense, look at your evening, look at your time, whatever you're going to sit down and do, and make sure you have everything mentally and mechanically to actually achieve what you're setting out to do.
That's very cool. Just as an aside, Mike, there's a lot of discussion about putting things in pies in the chat, but thinking just specifically about your fingers and all of the pies that you have them in. I think that would be a really interesting conversation to have in the future. I would like to have all three of you guys on again individually.
You mentioned pies, and I know we're kind of talking about pies like figuratively. Before I met Kfir, before I ever did flavor text, I briefly ran a custom order bakery whose flagship product was pies inside of cakes. You probably heard of the bacon or the chirpumple, which that Wall Street Journal story is about 10 years old now. And I did devise a recipe for that when one did not exist in the public sphere.
Holy crap.
Figured out how to make that work. And then I said, that's way too much at once. So for, I think, about a year and a half, you could order from me like a cherry pie inside of a devil's food cake, or a pumpkin pie inside of a spice cake, peach pie inside of an amaretto cake, stuff like that. And I gave it up because I was doing it at night while going to art school, and I just had no sleep ever. But yeah, that's pies.
I would like to point out it's my birthday this coming week, and pie inside of cake sounds like a great thing, Mike.
I would be willing to pay the FedEx overnight delivery fee for this.
Oh man,
for me to get it for my birthday? Thank you, Joby.
Yeah.
Hack that to make quick. It survive. Like, you might end up eating it with a spoon out of the FedEx box.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know. Is this a bad thing? That's either way we win. But no, my point being was that I think we'll definitely have you on to talk more about a lot of stuff in the future. Tim, you as well. But in the meantime, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yes. To get back to to talk about the tools, I guess specifically to achieve some of the to get to the art, to get working on the art. I'm a terrible person when it comes to time management. So for me, it's knowing my obstacles, and I'm terrible at time management. So I have a pretty steep hill to climb in order to kind of conquer that part of myself. And so I use tactics to do it. I guess in this case, what you would call tools. One such tactic is lists. Write down lists, things that I need to get done or things that I'm working on. And then once I have a list of 5, 6, 7 things, I have a mantra that I sort of remind myself, and it's the phrase, if you have more than three priorities, you really don't have any. And so that's what I do is I break down those lists and I go top 3 things. Those have to get done by priority. I usually use like stars or doodles. Like this one's got 6 dinosaurs. That means I have to do it first, or whatever the sort of legend key is to kind of know which ones of the list need to go first. But that's primarily one of the things that I used when juggling all the different art that I'm working on, whether it be client work for the tattooing, whether it be a commission that I've picked up through Twitch, or whether it be, a project that Flavor Text needs. And so, and I go and I had my, I kind of prioritize from the list. And then the other tactic that I use is something that was an advice given to me by someone that runs a YouTube channel. And he has a full-time day job as an engineer where he's pushing in, 50, 60 hours a week. And then he goes on to topple another 20, 30 hours in that week to do his editing and filming and YouTube stuff. And I said, how on earth can you do that? Like, where does the time come from?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I myself. And he says,
he says what? You cut out a little bit. He said what?
Oh, I'm sorry. He says that he has a trick. He tricks himself.
Oh.
He'll come tired on a Friday night. He knows that he's tired, and he knows that he's got 100 other things to think about. And one of those things could be watching Netflix and having a frozen pizza for dinner, and that sounds like heaven. But he tricks himself by rushing straight to the garage, or in this case, a studio space. He bypasses everything. Doesn't get the beer, doesn't get the water or the snack. He just goes straight into the room and pushes into it and starts working. And that's the trick, because your body then kind of re-revs itself up and says, okay, I guess we're doing this now. And once you kind of have a mental foothold, that's when you're able to now go and then get back to work, because you'll get excited about what it is you're working. And sort of like, so those tactics specifically would be prioritizing my list. And then sometimes it means staying up an extra hour late or whatever it is, coming home from work and just going straight into the studio space. And even like in the case that Kfir mentioned, the stream helps. Turn on that camera. Now you're accountable. Now people are watching you work. And so and so it kind of, it's a great way to kind of kickstart the energies, even if it's just to literally put pencil to paper and garbly-gook sketch some nonsense, just get the rhythms kind of turning, and then that can lead to something that's full. And much like Mike was mentioning, I love your phrase that you mentioned. I don't want to be a bottleneck. I don't want to be the obstacle that sort of pinches this off. I need to be productive. And I guess looking at it from that perspective, sitting in the room, and even if you're just drawing circles on a piece of paper just to loosen your wrist up, as long as you're gaining something from that and you're not just spinning your wheels. If you're like, okay, now I'm, the circle, I'm warmed up, I'm feeling good. Now, the camera's on, people are talking to me. Yeah, let's get a new piece of paper and we're off, we're running, we're doing something. And so that's helpful. I think that those particular tactics have been the most helpful for me. I still have an issue with time management.
You said that you were terrible at it, but it sounds like, you're actually pretty good at it, just in the sense of like, you're one, self-aware, and two, you have some working tools, and those are kind of like the two main ingredients to developing a functioning time management. But it took
a lot of exercise.
Yeah, sure.
I guess some people might be very punctual is a good example, right? Always on time. They never have an issue. They're there. They're accountable in that way.
Those guys are
that jerks. Would not be me. Yeah. In order to be punctual, I have to be insanely early. Like I'm preparing to leave an hour and a half before I have to be anywhere to get there kind of on time. Right. Like I'm a guy that's like, what time's the podcast? 5? Oh, that's 5 Eastern or 5 Pacific. Wait, what? I'm not good at that. So it takes a lot of mental whipping to sort of put put myself in that place where some people it might come a lot easier. Like I have to force myself to write a list where other people, it just might be the natural idea. Like, oh, of course, lists. Yeah, nothing new there. But for me, it's like, oh crap, if I don't write this down, it's gone in seconds. Like it's not going to be there. Goldfish brain is going to kick in and I'm not going to remember what I'm supposed to be working.
Well, the thing that I admire about people that are like good at making lists, or good at using lists, is that they're efficient about it. Because for me, like one of the things with lists is it can become its own project in itself, and then you're like making lists of lists, or like spending a lot of time thinking about like, well, what should this list do exactly, and what's going to be on it. But anyway, Mike, were you going to say something?
So yeah, this actually dovetails really well. Because Tim, you're talking about this guy you admire and how he outsmarts himself. And what you're actually describing is how you outsmart yourself. And when I was a kid, I had a wild problem with procrastination. Just wild. I still had all of the desire to like do everything under the sun, and everything had to be elaborate and 3 times the complexity that it needed to be. But you could also guarantee that I would leave it to the last 10% of the time that I had to do it. My parents will tell stories about me being in tears the night before a project was due, and that's just not a thing that happens anymore. I mean, I will still back myself into a corner time-wise, but it's the result of, like, it's like an airline crash. It's a cascading failure. If other projects took too long and this is more elaborate and we had change orders and whatever. But there's very little of just like, oh, I'm avoiding what I need to do. But, and if you're watching the stream, I've got this little note card here, and I've got piles and piles and piles of these, because these are the lists, and I'll set down for the beginning of the week, usually on Sunday night or Monday night if I'm running a little behind, and say, great, this is the stuff to get done this week.
For listeners, can you describe what you're holding up? And
yeah, so it's a little 4x6 note card, and it says this week 9/14 to 9/20. This is an older one. Mycenid update, which was for one of our pieces. Finished Harvard Square illustration, which was something for my day job. Purchase wrapped canvases. Install water filter. KDP ticket and cover resolution. And it's just a series of like, this is the next step on every project I have going. And if I get through this list before the following Sunday, everything I've gotten done, like all the deadlines will have been met that are coming up in that period of time, and everything else I'm working on will have moved at least one step forward. And it really helps with, I have a tendency to remember a deadline or a promise or the next step in something or something I'm the obstacle on, like while I'm in the car, which is a terrible time to do that because you can't fix the problem then. We don't do it in this house because we have tile in the shower, but in my previous house, we had, a fiberglass shower, and I had wet erase markers because I knew that once I stepped in there, that would be when I had the game-saving idea.
That's or fucking brilliant.
For a deadline, and if I waited until I got out and toweled off, it would be gone.
Holy
so if
fuck.
I write it on the wall, then I have it to come back to.
Why is this the first time in 43 years of being on this earth that someone has told me about that idea?
What's funny,
dry erase in the shower.
Who said that she write her papers in college that way because our brains are really contextual. It's why like you can walk into a room and forget what you were supposed to be doing because you've changed your context, and sometimes your brain just dumps that information. So if you're somebody who has like all your great ideas in the shower, consider bringing one of those markers in there. Because it's a great way to keep those thoughts together and not just try to squeeze them as hard as you can.
There's this one part I'm missing about working in the building for my actual employment day job. I would go into the bathroom, and that's when I would do all my best coding. Standing at the urinal, and just by the time I got back to my desk, I knew exactly what I needed to do. But I'd leave my desk to go to the bathroom and be like, I have no idea how I'm going to do this thing. And then, oh, now I get it. And I don't have that here at home.
So what you're saying is you need to install a urinal in your bathroom.
I was just going to say, yeah, you need to like create a mock-up of that whole experience in your house.
It wouldn't be a bad idea.
Kfir's trying to say something, but he's forgotten about pushing buttons again.
I was just saying urinals and showers you can write on. What? Now, I'm curious. Why does it not work with tile?
I don't know that it doesn't work with tile, but I don't want to get kicked out of this house because I wrote stupid shit on the tile.
It should be. It should
Tile
work.
might be fine if you're grout, right? You get this
Right.
rainbow
Don't
colored
cross the
grout.
lines.
Right.
Don't
right.
cross the lines.
Right. Exactly. Well, bringing it around to a close-ish. I know that there are some new developments on the horizon for flavor text. Maybe Kfir, you could start talking a little bit about whatever you're, as long as none of it is too super secret.
None of it is.
What's coming up soon, and what are you excited about?
So we've been talking a lot about a Kickstarter for flavor text where we would actually make a physical book, a physical cookbook. We've gone through some trials and tribulations in what that's going to look like. Initially, our idea was for physical book. Then it turned, because of 2020 being what it is, that changed into a digital book.
What happened in 2020?
Well, that's next podcast. We don't have time.
I don't know. What do you mean? Okay, sorry.
So yeah, now that we're coming to the close of 2020 and we've talked to some people who have had some very, very successful Kickstarters, we're talking above $100,000 raised for a book, for a gaming supplement. So we've been talking to them, and we've sort of moved back in the direction of a physical book. And so the plan right now is to launch it sometime in the spring, so we don't compete with holiday shopping and holiday Kickstarters, and we'll have more time to plan and strategize. The plan for the Kickstarter is to take all the content we will have published at that point, or at least the current content that we have, which is, I think, 12 or 13 chapters, and then add at least 7 more chapters to that. So about at minimum, a 200-page book.
Nice.
Of recipes. That includes everything: the stories, the recipes, and the gaming content. And then adding on to that, potentially, depending on stretch goals. So we actually have some D&D, industry celebrities already lined up that want to contribute, whether stories or gaming content. Sometimes full modules, not full as in 100-page modules, but taking the little gaming content we have and fleshing it out even more to some short modules that DMs can use. We have Stephen Radney McFarland, who has written 4 Wizards of the Coast on D&D. Stefan Pokorny from Dwarven Forge Miniatures is willing to contribute, and a few other people, Casey Rift and Skeeter Green. So that's going to be cool. Larry Elmore, which is sort of my bucket list item in life that I'm excited about. Larry Elmore has agreed to do a cover for the book as a stretch goal. So exciting stuff. There's a lot of potential in flavor text because we could go all sorts of different places. We could do a whole book just about cooking the undead or about cooking goblins or whatever. But this will be just sort of our first dip into those waters. So it'll be just the chapters we've published plus a bunch of new ones. So it's all random monsters. And we'll see how that goes. If it goes well, we'll do more. But we're waiting to see.
We are going to have a upcoming episode on Kickstarters in general with Gavin Valentine and Art of Blake. So might be some helpful information in there as well, like as far as what time of year is best to launch Kickstarter and what setting the goals, should it be high or low, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah. So, Mike, if you have anything that you want to add to that, you can. Or if not, I would just like to pose a question for you and Tim. What just is exciting for you about the future of flavor text in general? Like, what are some things you would like to see happen, or that possibilities on the horizon? Mike, how about you start?
I mean, I'm really excited to kind of get back to regular publication. There's just been so much that's gone on this year, personally, and of course in the world at large. It's definitely thrown it for a loop. It's made it more challenging to workshop recipes and do photo shoots and stuff like that. I'm also really kind of looking forward to us hitting that critical mass where there's a community. Both Tim and Kfir talked a lot about how Twitch and the community holds them accountable. And while we don't present our content in the same way, community engagement really helps with the feeling that there's a call and response. You know, you don't want to put stuff out. And I mean, it's great to get the money, and I know we've got those patrons, and we super appreciate them. But it is so super motivating to hear from someone that they made something and it worked out, or they made something and it didn't work out, but how can we maybe fix it? And we put a lot of effort into kind of providing a variety of recipes in terms of entrees and desserts and appetizers and vegetarian and so on. So that's really the point where I think it's going to get super, super exciting, is that when there's a community that is trading and working with themselves and with us, to become super motivating.
How about you, Tim?
Sorry, I'm just writing a quick note that I had an idea for flavor text that I was going to share after the podcast.
Oh, there you go.
Give me 1 second.
No worries.
And it's gone. He forgot already.
Yeah, like I said, I got to drill it.
Quick, run to the shower.
I was just going to say he's got to go run to the shower and write on his dry erase. Write a permanent marker on the tiles.
Flavor text has been exciting to me for many reasons. One, I've always been very, very fantasy oriented in my art. One of the things I love about creativity and art in general is that it gives us an opportunity to bring something that is completely amorphous or not tactile to life. You know what I mean? The ideas throughout human history of fantastic, literally, embellished, creatures and things that we don't see in reality being translated in imagery. It's fantastic. I think it's one of the common hooks that we all share. So we started dipping our hands in paint and sticking it in the walls. So we wanted to sort of to sort of share that sort of euphoria we get from art. So I'm excited to be a part of that, and specifically involved in something like a supplement for Dungeons and Dragons. I myself never knew the game until very recently, including the time that it took me to start working with everyone here and on flavor text. So I mean, I'm excited mostly for my continued involvement. As Kfir mentioned, the Kickstarter is something I'm getting excited about as well, because I feel that I myself am still growing as an artist, as artists should continually grow, and I'm excited to apply the things that I've improved on to the work that's coming. So, and actually, Joby, working side by side with you has been a huge inspiration. Sight alone, but watching your stream, and also
because
I lurk, I sneak around in the background, but honestly, just getting an opportunity to watch you and to learn from you, even in just a peripheral way, I'm excited about the changes that are coming because of that. So mostly it's about getting to the work. That's what's exciting,
Right.
Getting to see it come to fruition. So yeah.
Yeah, right on. Cool, man. Thank you. Appreciate that.
What about you, Joby?
What you guys said, ditto.
What
no,
a cop.
no, flavor text is become more and more dear to me, and I'm really looking forward to. This isn't just a cop out to just copy what Mike said, but I'm most excited to see it grow into more viewers, more people getting eyes on it, and and yes, the whatever financial compensation that comes along with it is great. But I mean, there's so much D&D content in the world. People have the choice of so many things that they can go after. It's just kind of like waiting for them to see it, because I know that they'll get stoked on it.
Oh man, that brings up a question that I wanted to ask. I totally forgot about it.
Go for it.
What's the difference between the official D&D cooking thing and flavor text?
There's an official book that's coming out. I don't know if it has already. It was coming out, I think, this month, and it's mostly just random recipes, as far as I could tell. It's like, here's lembas bread sort of thing, right? It's not game oriented. I think it was actual real recipes that you can cook at home. It wasn't game oriented, as in it lacked the stories, and it lacked the connection to specific monsters, as in you're cooking that monster, and it also lacked the gaming content. So it was just recipes. That was a book that's just officially published by Wizards of the Coast, but content wise, it's very, very different.
It seems like a missed opportunity for them not to make flavor text official.
It's boring. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Anyway,
if Wizards of the Coast gave us a call and wanted to make flavor text an official thing, we would consider it. You know,
Wizards of the Coast, are you listening? All right, a final wrap up question, not related to flavor text, not necessarily related to what you guys are doing working on your own projects, but just in the world at large. One thing that you guys are excited about, one thing that gets you stoked. Fear.
Let's start it the other way around. We'll start with Joby and we'll go to Tim. And
well, the hesitation in my voice is because at the end of 2019, I said, man, I can't wait for 2019 to be over. And then in 2020, the fucking world ended. But I want to say so badly that 2021 is going to be... what if I end it in a question mark? Better? I'm excited.
That's not, yeah. That's a wide range of what better could be.
So, right, exactly.
Start building your bunker.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm excited about the bunker that I'm building in the backyard and stockpiling food and what kind of items they're going to have on sale at Costco. But yeah, but in more seriousness, something that I'm excited about getting into another D&D game. The one that we had going a little while ago, it had to end for various reasons, as they do. But like I said, I haven't really played much since I was a kid, and just recently started dipping my toe back into it. And I'm excited about the possibility of finding another group that can happen with.
Just don't make another anti-hero.
That's a whole podcast in itself, Moose. Me and you, we're gonna duke it out. All right, Kfir, go for it.
Okay, fine. I'm hoping. I don't know that I'm excited about it, but I am hoping that 2021 things, and I don't think it'll happen, honestly, but things will be better and conventions can come back so that I can actually make more of a living than I am. But actually 2020, I will say this, that 2020 having forced me to stay home actually forced me to change, right? Professionally and personally in some ways. So those changes are exciting because it showed me that I can stay. I don't have to go to conventions. I can stay home and I can make new things. It actually pushed me creatively again. So there's the digital maps that I've not done before, and I started doing this year, and are really cool. And I'm excited about those. And there's flavor text work, and so. And the fact that I was able to survive, granted with some outside help, but I was able to survive without doing conventions. So that's an exciting sort of thing to be able to, at the end of the year, look at it and say, is this something that I really have to do? Do I have to continue doing conventions for a living? I'm sure Tim and his other half, Bianca, are also thinking the same thing. D&D, I'll have to copy that. We played online for a while, and I'm finding that playing online just isn't quite as exciting for me as playing in person. So I'm really looking forward to the day when we can get together and play in person again. And that's it. I'm looking forward to seeing people, like actually seeing people and going places without worrying about it. So
yeah.
Not 2021, 2022.
Yeah, 2022 is then when that's going to happen, honestly. Like I have my birthday's coming up this week, and I made reservations at a restaurant, and I invited a very small group of people, and a couple of them are basically at risk because they're older. And I said, look, this is just an invitation because I'm being polite, because I'd like your company, but I would rather you live to drink another day with me, right? So if you need to refuse, I am totally down with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would rather, and I'm
almost prefer it, right?
Yeah, I would almost prefer it. So yeah, I'm excited for when we do get back to actually hanging out with people without worrying about that stuff.
Yeah, the question is posed in the present tense, something that is currently happening that you're excited about, but there's nothing, I don't think in the current circumstances there's anything wrong with us being excited about things in the future. But Mike, how about you?
I got a couple things that I'm kind of excited about. I'm putting together a Halloween costume that I think is going to be fun. I'm not going to use it anywhere except at my office.
That works.
On Zoom calls.
Oh, he's giving us the 1 second. I don't know if he's going to try and share a picture with the chat.
Yeah, I thought maybe a picture was coming.
No, I accidentally ruined something I was working on.
No.
Editing an ebook, and held down my push-to-talk key and just fucked up all the code. So that hurt that was. So there's that. One of my freelance projects, I'm working with the local children's hospital and School of Medicine on a gamified pediatric clinical tool to help children who have survived oncological and hematological disorders with their post-treatment care plans. So that's just a really engaging, exciting, it's super cool to draw dragons, but it's way cooler to get to draw dragons and help kids who survived cancer. So that's something I'm really, really looking forward to.
Cool, man. Right on. Cool. Tim, how about you?
I'm really lucky that a lot of the things that I would be excited about have all sort of toppled onto me at once. Very recently, I just recently got my own room at the tattoo shop, which is really exciting. It's kind of like it's a promotion without being promoted. It's the idea that I get to sort of like, I guess I solidified myself in my own space, and that feels really cool. I am more than excited to have the opportunity to work alongside my wife, Bianca, who is an artist as well. And that's one of the things that I think it makes the home, which is currently a weird studio / sanctuary, it's being balanced in the most interesting way, simply because I have my wife to lean on, which is nice, and so honestly, right now, like as far as future prospects, I'm gonna echo what everyone's been saying, man. I can't wait to see a better year. I can't wait to start seeing people. But truthfully, I am also just kind of focused on the positives that I have in front of me right now. The work and fortunate work that I can do with everyone here, with Flavor Text. I'm really excited about the tattooing I got coming up. I got some really cool and exciting drawings that I'm working on. And as I mentioned, my rock, my strength, my wife being literally through that wall is fantastic too. So, and we can share ideas and work side by side, and and definitely kind of progress together, which is nice. That's exciting.
Moose, I don't want you to feel left out. I got a rare opportunity to answer that question myself. Do you got anything?
Damn, I was just about to interject like a whine, like nobody ever cares what I'm thinking.
There you go.
No, but as soon as COVID's over, I didn't ever have a big desire to travel, but after this, yeah, I want to travel. I want to go to Europe or something.
Mm-hmm.
Same part.
Amen.
As soon as they let us back in, right?
Yeah. Hopefully nothing too crazy happens with this election, and then they just sequester us away to be our own like a little what's it called, a leper colony forever, right?
Where America's already on
the plague island.
Yeah, we're already on the world shit list many times over. It's like it would be just a fucking perfect pin the tail on the donkey to get like some political. Anyway, never mind that. Thank you guys. Thank you guys. This was so much fun. I love you guys.
Thank
I love
you.
talking to you guys so much, and we're going to talk to each of you again soon, so everybody stay tuned for that. A quick mention about next week. We're going to be talking to Sal, another fellow streamer, friend of the podcast, known as the Dark Cloak on Twitch, and we're going to be talking a lot about being a jack of all trades, how to get it all done, imposter syndrome, wide-ranging, but very pertinent to all of the plights of the artist. So come back for that one. Yeah, thank you guys again. I'm gonna sign it off there. You guys have a great one.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care, guys.